After arriving in Mournhold, you decide to explore the city. And after spending some time walking around the city, you decide to check out a tunnel that leads to an abandoned crypt. However, as you enter the crypt, you see that it's not exactly empty of the living. You seem to have wandered into a meeting. After you accidentally interrupt the meeting, the High Elf there turns and says to you,
"At last you are here. Welcome, Proxy. Hermaeus Mora, Daedric Prince of Forbidden Knowledge, has marked you as Fate's champion."
Hello and welcome to Anatomy of Fiction. In today's video, we will be discussing Hermaeus Mora. More specifically, why would anyone choose to worship Hermaeus Mora and why you may want to on your next playthrough. To do this, we must first go over several things. Firstly, who even is Hermaeus Mora? So what is he known as, by who, and why? Along with what he is associated with. Then we will move on to discuss the history of Hermaeus Mora. So what historical events has Hermaeus Mora been involved in? After this, we will move on to what is Hermaeus Mora god over, along with who worships him and how do they worship him. And finally, we will discuss the various creations of Hermaeus Mora. So his realm in Oblivion, his artifacts, and any creatures associated with him. So let us begin with who Hermaeus Mora is. Hermaeus Mora is a Daedric Prince of many names, with the Khajiit knowing him as both the Tide King and Hermora. So the Tide King association is due to several things. Hermaeus Mora is said to house his great library under the sea. He is also said to be the master of the seas, and is claimed to have a habit of taking ships and their crews of those who carry cargo that is forbidden, keeping them as a prize in a place known as Fathom's Drift, according to Tamrielic myths. But along with this, we also see some more ancient names springing up when it comes to Hermaeus Mora. One of these actually coming from the ancient Atmorans and more recent Bosma, this being Woodland Man. Now, considering that there is little to associate Hermaeus Mora with the woodlands or forests, it is possible that this name may actually be wilderness or wastelands instead of woodlands, as Hermaeus Mora is associated with sharing secrets in desolate places, as he is the keeper of forbidden knowledge. He does also have other names that we see surrounding the knowledge, like the Dunmeri names, he who records all knowledge and keeper of the Ogma Infinitum. The Ogma Infinitum is an incredibly dangerous book that grants the reader vast knowledge and can either cause the brain of the reader to bleed, or the reader can use the power of the book to become a demigod. But anyway, this book was created by a scribe of the Oriel who was granted the knowledge of Hermaeus Mora, and is one of the artifacts associated with Hermaeus Mora. If we look at the symbols that represent Hermaeus Mora, one of these symbols is an eye, this being considered the all-seeing eye. This is due to Hermaeus Mora being considered as all-knowing out of all the Daedric Princes, as many of them aren't all that all-knowing. Interestingly enough, the eye also correlates with one of the Dunmeri names for the Daedric Prince, this being the Golden Eye. Now, when it comes to the physical manifestation of Hermaeus Mora, he primarily appears as a multi-eyed, tentacled being, and depending on the occasion, he also appears having claws of a crustacean, looking like a sort of deepest depths of the sea kind of combination between an octopus and a crab, but with more eyes. So what does this tell us about why anyone would want to worship Hermaeus Mora? Well, considering that Hermaeus Mora having names associated with the sea and the tides, it hints at him having some control over the currents of the ocean, which, if you were a sailor, it would be a rather important god to appease, considering he controls the ocean supposedly. For those who are not sailors, but instead desire knowledge, the names suggesting his all-knowingness would draw in those curious about the secrets of the world, along with the symbolism of the all-seeing eye. The desire to learn knowledge that would not normally be attainable would lead some to worshipping this Daedric Prince. But this is only part of the story. To better understand why anyone would worship Hermaeus Mora, we should move on to the historical events involving this Daedric Prince. For the history of Hermaeus Mora, we shall begin before there was really a habit of writing and recording the history, along with being in a rather unusual location. For this, we will be going to Oblivion, more specifically Apocrypha. as here is where Hermaeus Mora would put out a call for help to protect the realm of Apocrypha from those who did not earn the knowledge they sought. This is when the clan of Dremora, known as the Remnants, would hear the message, and they would seek out Hermaeus Mora. In their journey, they would find 2 relics, a spyglass and a key. These would merge with the essences of the Remnant clan. This would open the gateway to what they call the Crux, which is a small pocket realm that only the Remnant clan are able to enter. With this, the Remnant clan would become the protectors of the knowledge within Apocrypha. Now moving on to the Merithic era, this being over on the island of Solstheim with the Skal. Now the Skal view Hermaeus Mora, or Hermaeus as they call him, as an enemy. This was due to Hermaeus Mora constantly trying to trick the Skal into giving up their secrets. Now for a long time, Hermaeus Mora would be unsuccessful. This being until Miraak, a dragon priest, would reach out to Hermaeus Mora. Hermaeus Mora would teach Miraak how to bend the will of dragons, and he would become the first dragonborn. Miraak would become the champion of Hermaeus Mora. Now, considering that Hermaeus Mora was considered to be the enemy of the Skal, this was not approved of. And when it was found out by another dragon priest, known as Valok the Jailer, he would challenge Miraak to a duel. This duel would be so vicious that it would cause the island of Solstheim to be ripped from modern-day Skyrim. Valok would defeat Miraak in this battle, and as he prepared to strike the fatal blow, Miraak would be snatched by Hermaeus Mora, preventing the death of his champion. He would live on in Apocrypha, waiting for his chance for revenge. Now moving on to either the late Merithic era or the early First era. This is when a series of events would lead to a Daedric Prince being forgotten. So during this strange series of events, the Daedric Prince Athelia had used her power to alter fate. This was done to prevent a catastrophe from occurring. This would lead to Hermaeus Mora examining the threads of fate related to Athelia. Hermaeus Mora would realize that what Athelia had done had caused irreparable damage to the threads of fate. And Hermaeus Mora would be concerned about what Athelia would do next, whether or not she would attempt to influence fate again. Athelia, realizing that she had the power to influence fate, would build what was known as the Loom of the Untraveled Road. This machine had the power to completely alter people's fates due to its ability to tap into the power of the many paths. And with this, Athelia had the power to give everyone the history and life they desired most. Doing so would break the shackles of fate. Hermaeus Mora could see that this was not a good thing at all. The unnatural manipulations were causing the many paths to splinter, and the future of reality was hanging in the balance. If Athelia achieved her goal, reality would shatter. So Hermaeus Mora felt the need to take action. Here he would seek out and form an alliance between him, Azura, Boethia, and Mephala. Hermaeus Mora would warn Athelia not to use the loom and abandon her plan to save the city of Neriaster. Athelia would refuse to listen to the warnings of Hermaeus Mora. So this would lead to Hermaeus Mora, Azura, Boethia, and Mephala coming up with a plan to defeat Athelia. These 4 Daedric princes would take possession of mortal champions and meet at a shrine in the ruined city of Anudnabia, which was submerged by Athelia, meddling with fate. Here, the champions possessed by the Daedric princes would enter a demiplane that would not be perceivable to Athelia, preventing her from finding out about their plan. The 4 princes would create weapons. Their purposes were to counteract Athelia's fate manipulation abilities. Mephala would create the Skein of Secrets. This would provide Mephala with the ability to locate both Athelia and her unseen by tracing the remnants of Athelia's power, which was normally invisible to normal magical observation. Azura would create the Lamp of Clarity. This would allow Azura to see Athelia and the unseen, along with create portals to the path that had the ability to reach Athelia. Boethia's creation was known as the Abolisher. This was a blade that had the ability to open, close, and sever connections between paths. Finally, Hermaeus Mora would create his weapon, known as the Echoneer. This device was able to track any lingering memory of Athelia and also had the ability to erase it. With these weapons, the allied princes would prepare their armies and attack. This led to Athelia being cornered in the Ayleid city of Miscarcand, which happened to be a major shrine to her. With the combined efforts of the princes, Athelia would be drained of her power, leading to her power and strength being the equivalent of a mere mortal. This would allow the princes to imprison Athelia in Mythos, which is the core at the center of Apocrypha. But this would not exactly go to plan. Athelia would plant a little failsafe in the mind of Torvasad. This would eventually remind him of who Athelia was and provide Torvasad the information vital to freeing Athelia. Athelia would see why Hermaeus Mora was imprisoning her. Athelia was able to perceive that she was a threat to reality. Now that Athelia was imprisoned, the princes would attempt to erase the memory of her existence. But anyway, moving on to the first era. This being with the Dunmer Prior Durdin, as the Dunmer was given a task by Vivek. Vivek had requested that Prior was to create a relic out of the tusk of an unknown creature. This tusk was a memento from Vivek's various grand adventures. Vivek wanted this relic to be a relic of great power, and with Prior's connections with the Daedra, this is exactly why he was entrusted with the task. So Prior would reach out to Hermaeus Mora. The Daedric Prince would help Prior to turn the tusk into the Fulcrum Obscura, a relic with the power to uncover any secret, even those of the dead. Moving on to the second era, in the year 582. This is when there would be the return of an old enemy. This being, of course, through the assistance of others. Torvasad, the former servant of Athelia, had begun to remember his Daedric Prince after many centuries. This being through a strange recurring dream he would have. Torvasad would go to Periite and Vaermina, two Daedric princes who, as it turns out, were having the same recurring dream, but a little less vivid. This would lead to them realizing that their memories were altered, and the two Daedric princes would be furious with Hermaeus Mora, leading to an alliance with Torvasad. This would not go unnoticed by Hermaeus Mora, who would also notice the strange ties to fate that the vestige had, leading to Hermaeus Mora requesting one of his followers, Laramil the Wise, to request the help of the strange mortal. As Hermaeus Mora saw the vestige as the only person capable of helping him in preventing the crisis that was about to occur, which had the power to destroy both Nian and Apocrypha. So, Laramil the Wise and the vestige would go on a quest to recover the three glyphics, these being the Emerald Glyphic, the Onyx Glyphic, and the Umber Glyphic. But the glyphics would not be the only thing they uncovered. The duo would uncover a conspiracy among the followers of Hermaeus Mora. This complex conspiracy would even include a vampiric threat, along with a traitor inside of the cult of Hermaeus Mora. The vestige would kill the traitor, and Hermaeus Mora would find out that the traitor was working for two other Daedric princes, but which Daedric princes were unknown. But anyway, moving on, over to the Telvanni township known as Bal Sanar. Now in this little township, something strange was occurring. Due to the Telvanni splinter group here disliking the rise of the Tribunal Temple, they would create a time knot through the use of Hermaeus Mora's artifact, this being a glyphic. This time knot would place the township in a time between the Battle for Red Mountain and the year 582 in the Second Era, causing a looping of events rather than a continuation of time. Due to the looping nature of this town, the Telvanni there would recognize the vestige, along with the Stygic Order monk by the name of Circe, who had in previous loops tried to fix time. So to stop Circe and the vestige, the Telvanni mage, Coven Girion, would tap into the power of the time knot and would use it to summon ancient creatures. Circe and the vestige would manage to defeat the Telvanni mage and would attempt to close the time knot. However, it would fling them into the future and the past. With this, they would see the destined future of the township if the Telvanni mages continued. The Telvanni mages would make a deal with Periite in an attempt to stop the duo from undoing the time knot. This would lead to the town being filled with Periite's plague. The vestige and Circe would eventually manage to close the time knot, however with great cost. Circe would be fragmented and scattered across time. Even with the assistance from Hermaeus Mora, Circe would appear at different points throughout time from her birth to her death and afterwards. Whilst Hermaeus Mora was distracted, Periite and Vaermina would have their followers join forces in what would be a new cult, dedicated to both of these Daedric princes, this being known as the Hidden Kindred. It was led by the highest priest of Periite, Blight Crown. A rogue Telvanni mage by the name of Shelreni Barrow would also join an alliance with the Hidden Kindred. So the Hidden Kindred, to complete their plans, would require a special artifact, this being the Fulcrum Obscura. Now this plan would not be the most successful. However, Torvasad would manage to take half of the Fulcrum Obscura, using this relic to uncover long-lost information that would help him to further his plan. The Hidden Kindred would make their way to Apocrypha. Here, they would use magic to move beings and objects through the different layers of reality. This was done to conceal the cult's modified version of the senses of corruption. Now, these modified senses would spread an arcane plague. This plague was created from a combination of Periite's disease and Vaermina's dream essence. This plague was used to infect and corrode Apocrypha's fabric, along with it being used to infect Hermaeus Mora's subjects, tormenting them, blinding them, and causing them to become frenzied. This would eventually lead to Hermaeus Mora becoming incapacitated. The severity of this plague threatened to dissolve Apocrypha and sever the link between Hermaeus Mora and his own domain completely. With the severity of this plague, it allowed the Hidden Kindred to conceal agents and objects between the different layers of Apocrypha, and would make it very difficult for Hermaeus Mora to track them. This plague would spread through Apocrypha and then eventually make its way into adjacent realms, like the Infinite Panopticon. With this, Vaermina would hide inside the body of Shelreni Barrow, who would then go on to enter the Infinite Panopticon. Here they sought one of the glyphics that contained hidden memories, and with the presence of Vaermina, it would continue to weaken Hermaeus Mora, leading to the prince becoming trapped within one of Vaermina's nightmares. But thankfully for Hermaeus Mora, one of his watchlings by the name of Scrut and the vestige would manage to break through the nightmare and set Hermaeus Mora free. This would cause Vaermina to flee, but the senses of corruption were still there. Thankfully, the vestige would be helped by the ghost of a Telvanni magister known as Melon the Mouthless. Now Melon would assist the vestige through the use of his ghost sight to find the hidden senses, allowing them to be destroyed and stopping the plague. Thankfully, this would prevent the destruction of Apocrypha, but Torvasad would manage to escape Apocrypha with his recovered memories of Athelia. So with these memories of Athelia being imprisoned and with witnessing the threads of fate, Torvasad would continue to work to free Athelia, managing to collect the abolisher from the hidden shrine of Mephala, where it was previously kept hidden away from meddling hands and prying eyes. Torvasad would then travel to the submerged shrine of Hermaeus Mora in the former city of Anadnabia. Here, Torvasad would use the blade to open a portal to Mythos in an attempt to free Athelia. Here, he would summon other Daedra associated with Athelia to slow down the vestige. Torvasad would cut a path in the spire that he believed was Athelia's prison, but would not find the Daedric Prince there. As with Torvasad remembering Athelia, she had regained her powers, which had allowed her to escape. Torvasad would flee and search for Athelia. With the discovery that Athelia was no longer imprisoned, Hermaeus Mora would reveal the truth.
This spire was never Athelia's prison. Being forgotten was. The moment Torvasad finally remembered his prince, its power to hold Athelia began to wane. Now, new paths form before us. Some lead to survival, others destruction.
The vestige would find Athelia, who would not be in control of her powers. This would lead to the vestige helping the Daedric Prince walk the many paths to find the other versions of the Daedric Prince to help restore Athelia's memories and power to allow her to become stable again. However, this would not be for the good of the people. Instead, she would use her regained abilities to once again meddle in time and fate, attempting to rewrite history so that her conflict with the Daedric Princes never occurred in the past, with the final stage of her plan being to destroy the shackles of fate and allow everyone to live out their desired story. This would not go undetected, however, with the loom being destroyed in an attempt to prevent Athelia from meddling in fate any further. However, Athelia, with the destruction of her loom, would be both enraged and filled with the power of the many paths. Athelia would launch another attack against Hermaeus Mora and the stability of reality. Athelia's power and manipulation of fate was causing distortions of fate that were so severe that these distortions were becoming tears in the fabric of reality. With these rifts, the fabric shreds being so dangerous that it could cause the destruction of the threads surrounding them, along with the destruction of anything that touched them. The more of these rifts appearing, the more damage to reality would occur, until eventually it would just crumble. To combat this, the vestige would take the relics of the Daedric Princes to the shrines of the Daedric Princes that had created them to recharge them. After this, the vestige, Scrut, and Laramil would return to where the loom of the untraveled road had once stood. Here they would use the Econia to locate Athelia. But they would also reveal more with the memory shown by the Econia. They would uncover the plan of Athelia, her desire to take Apocrypha from Hermaeus Mora and transform it into her own realm, the Miramor. The group knew this needed to be prevented, so they would figure out how to make a relic that would stop Athelia. To do this, the vestige would have to travel to Seond. Here, they would retrieve a shard from the first ever Daedra created by Athelia. But this was no walk in the park. The vestige would be confronted by Torvasad, who would attempt to use a tear in reality to erase the vestige and prevent them from stopping Athelia. However, the vestige would be saved by Curate Gadaean, who would push them out of the way, being erased from existence instead. The rest of the group would take the shard and use an arcane ritual to create the Mirror of Truth. They would head to Apocrypha to find Athelia's influence over the realm already growing. Seeing the shard born spread throughout the realm, Scrut would stay behind to take care of the already spreading tears in reality, leaving Laramil and the vestige to head to the sanctum of Hermaeus Mora. Here, Hermaeus Mora was imprisoned and had his power siphoned by Torvasad, using the Staff of Many Paths, preventing Hermaeus Mora from fighting Athelia. The vestige would confront Athelia and would turn the Mirror of Truth on her. Here she would be reminded of Hermaeus Mora's prophecy and that it was true, that Athelia would destroy reality if it continued. Because of this, she agreed to be imprisoned again. She would instead be imprisoned in a reality that was severed from the rest. And then the tears in reality would be repaired through a spell of Hermaeus Mora's creation, and the memory of Athelia would once again be destroyed. Moving on to the Third Era, this being in the year 405. This is when an agent of the Blades would encounter Hermaeus Mora. In this encounter, Hermaeus Mora would task the agent of the Blades with a little quest. He would request that the agent of the Blades kill a noble that Hermaeus Mora disliked, and in doing so, the agent of the Blades would be greatly rewarded. The agent would receive the Ogma Infinitum. Moving on to the year 433, still in the Third Era. This being with the hero of Kvatch. This is where the hero of Kvatch would be given the task by Hermaeus Mora to capture the souls of one person of each of the 10 major races in Tamriel. This being done so the followers of Hermaeus Mora could perform a divination ritual. As a reward, the hero of Kvatch would be given the Ogma Infinitum. Now we move into the Fourth Era in the year 201 with the last Dragonborn. Here, a member of the College of Winterhold would request the assistance of the last Dragonborn. So the maid Septimus Cygnus was attempting to open a Dwemer lockbox, which he believed held the heart of Lorcan. Cygnus would request the last Dragonborn find an Elder Scroll and record its insights, using a piece of ancient Dwemer technology. After this, Cygnus would then request that the last Dragonborn find samples of the blood of every elven race, doing so to attempt to recreate the Dwemer blood. Once Cygnus had figured out how to open the Dwemer lockbox, an abyss would appear. As it turns out, this talking abyss would be Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric Prince, who had set Cygnus on this task. The last Dragonborn would then collect the blood of every type of elf and bring it back to Cygnus. He would then use the samples to open the Dwemer lockbox. Cygnus would then disappear, and it would be revealed that it was not the heart of Lorcan in the lockbox, instead it was the Ogma Infinitum. Moving on, still in the year 201. The last Dragonborn would make their way over to the island of Solstheim. Here the last Dragonborn would find the Temple of Mirak. The last Dragonborn would find that this temple was being rebuilt by what seemed to be an army under the control of Mirak. bewitched by him. Here, the last Dragonborn would encounter Freya, who would help them navigate the temple and search for what was causing her people to be bewitched. They would head deep inside the temple into the sanctum. Here, the duo would discover a black book titled Waking Dreams. As the last Dragonborn opened the book and began to read it, they would be yanked inside by dark tentacles reaching out from the book, the last Dragonborn being transported into a strange realm. Here, they would be unable to move, seeing Mirak arrive. After that, he told the last Dragonborn his plans to take over Solstheim. Then he would fly away on his dragon. The last Dragonborn would then be taken back to the Sanctum. There, they would be taken by Freya to Skarl village. Here, the last Dragonborn would free the villagers from the trance that Mirak had put them under. Then, the last Dragonborn would go and cleanse the Allmaker stones to slow down Mirak, whilst they hunted for the rest of the strange black books. They would then use one of these black books to transport themselves to Apocrypha to meet with Hermaeus Mora. They would be offered a deal, provide the secrets of the skull for the knowledge to defeat Mirak. The last Dragonborn would take this to the skull, and Storn Cragstrider would sacrifice himself, dying as he gave their ancient enemy the secrets he wished. The last Dragonborn would be taught the final word of the shout needed to get rid of Mirak. The last Dragonborn would then go back to Apocrypha to confront Mirak. Here, the last Dragonborn would defeat the first Dragonborn, saving Solstheim from Mirak's influence. So what does the history of Hermaeus Mora tell us about why he may be worshipped? Well, if we look at the story of Mirak long ago, when he was taught by Hermaeus Mora how to bend the will of dragons, this knowledge provided by Hermaeus Mora gave Mirak great power, which was used in an attempt to take over Solstheim. We see that this power even gave him the ability to control the minds of people. So in Mirak's dealings with Hermaeus Mora, it provided Mirak with great knowledge, which then in turn made him one of the most powerful beings to exist. If we look on the other side of this, with the curate Gadaean, who during Athelia's meddling with fate disappeared from reality, but then was supposedly brought back by Hermaeus Mora. In this case and in this story surrounding Hermaeus Mora ensures the fabric of reality is not unwoven. He, through his trapping of Athelia, ensured that the world would continue and that destiny would be unharmed, preventing the destruction of both Apocrypha and Neon. So based on the history of Hermaeus Mora, he may be worshipped for his ability to provide immense power, or for his ability to keep the strings of fate neatly woven together, ensuring the past is not meddled with so the future can occur. But this is only part of the story, not the full picture, so we should move on to discuss who worships Hermaeus Mora. Over the eras, many have been attracted to Hermaeus Mora worship, some of these being entire cults, others being just seekers of knowledge. One of these races that have made a habit of worshipping Hermaeus Mora is the Aelids. We see this with the city of Biznansel, which is where, under the guidance of High Priest Ulus Kant, Hermaeus Mora worship would grow popular. Now, this Church of Hermaeus Mora would be very popular, drawing in those who were incredibly influential and learned within the community. With the increase in the numbers of the church, Ulus Kant would request more influence over the governing of the city, but King Dinar would deny this request. A few months later, King Dinar would be removed from the throne. After this, the city of Biznansel would be turned into a shrine for Hermaeus Mora. In this city, forbidden knowledge about the natural order would be kept. The forbidden knowledge would allow those who knew it to manipulate the very fabric of reality. Now, what is interesting about the city of Biznansel and the Aelids there is that the city would actually be saved from the Alessian uprising, through a deal with Hermaeus Mora, of course. For the continued devotion to Hermaeus Mora, he would provide the city with protection, hiding it from the Alessians. Now, with the Aelids, there is also the claim that in Shadowfen, there was a sorcerer who worshipped Hermaeus Mora. Their love of knowledge and Hermaeus Mora was so strong that they would create a special library. The magical library would gather books from across Tamriel, no matter where or when they were published. So the Aelids saw Hermaeus Mora as both a source of knowledge and in some cases a form of protection. But that does not provide the answer for all that worshipped Hermaeus Mora, as there are several other races that worship this Daedric prince, like the Bosmiri cults. Now in the Bosmer belief, the Woodland Man, or Hermaeus as they called him, was not the Daedric prince Hermaeus Mora. They insist who they worship is different. In this second era, we do see a group of Bosmiri Hermaeus Mora worshippers, this group being known as the Wooded Eye. The Wooded Eye were the guardians of the Cradle of Ilmiris. The Cradle of Ilmiris holds the Vault of Memories, this being a library which holds secret knowledge. Now, there are also Dunmeri cults that worship Hermaeus Mora. The Dunmeri cults believe that to them and to Hermaeus Mora that knowledge and memories were the only treasures of value. An example of these cults is the Devotees of Knowledge. This cult seeks out enlightenment and illumination through Hermaeus Mora. They also believe that Hermaeus Mora, who they also refer to as the Golden Eye, views the followers of the divines as ignorant. These cults would guard the secret libraries of Hermaeus Mora. They believe that by devoting their lives to serving Hermaeus Mora, they will be granted entry to his endless library in Apocrypha in their afterlife, being given the ability to browse the books there on their endless search for knowledge. Now, moving on to the Nords. So the Nords' belief of Hermaeus Mora stems from the Atmorans, as the Nords descend from this ancient group of humans. The Nords also refer to him as Hermaeus Mora, but acknowledge him being a Daedric prince, unlike the Bosmer. The Nords view Hermaeus Mora as more of a testing god, and with the Nords there are stories they have about Hermaeus Mora trying to trick them, these including his interactions with Ysgramor. The most well-known example is when Hermaeus Mora allegedly attempted to trick the Nords into becoming elves. This occurred when Ysgramor was hunting in the Atmoran Frostwood. He was attempting to hunt the white stag of Fulgrim, but he kept losing its trail. Eventually, after losing the trail of the stag again, a white hare would appear. The little hare would tell Ysgramor where the stag had gone, and Ysgramor would ask the hare how he knew this, which the hare would tell him that it could hear where the stag went with its long ears, and if Ysgramor had long ears, he would be able to hear where his prey went. As Ysgramor stood there pondering this and wishing that he had ears as long as the hare would twitch its nose, and Ysgramor's ears would grow long and pointed. Then, all of a sudden, a fox would appear out of nowhere and kill the talking hare. The fox would then tell Ysgramor that the hare was no normal hare. Instead, it was Hermaeus Mora. And of course, the fox itself was also no normal fox. It was in fact Shaw. It would also tell Ysgramor off as he had nearly allowed himself to be turned into an elf. So with the Nords worshipping of Hermaeus Mora, it is more about appeasing him rather than actually worshipping him. The Nords keep statues of the testing gods in their houses as a way of doing this. Now onto the Khajiit. Hermaeus Mora to this race has several names, which also hint at his purpose to them. If we look at the Khajiit origin stories for the gods, Hermaeus Mora or Hermora was said to be the tides leading to his various nicknames like Spirit of the Tide. He is viewed by the Khajiit as the keeper of the knowledge of others. However, he is also seen as a testing god, this being with some viewing the worship of Hermaeus Mora and seeking him out, causing a fate worse than death. This did not stop all Khajiit from having interactions with Hermaeus Mora, as we see with the Khajiit shrine to the Golden Eye hidden in the ruined Khajiit temple of Claw's Strike. There are also groups outside of the specific races that worship Hermaeus Mora. An example of this being sailors. As in the belief of sailors, Hermaeus Mora, or as they would call him, Hermaeus Mora, sailors believe that Hermaeus Mora's domain is the unknowable oceans, that he is the Daedric Prince of hidden shoals, whirlpools, and sudden squalls. They believe that all of the oceans of all of the worlds are connected to the reality sinkhole known as Fathom's Drift, which happens to be within Chroma Incognito in Apocrypha. Here, ships of those who are said to have angered Hermaeus Mora are said to be taken. Those who have ignored the omens are said to end up in Fathom's Deep. There are also other groups that worship Hermaeus Mora, like the Ciphers of the Eye. The Ciphers of the Eye are a rather interesting group. They are essentially mortal scholars from Neon that were personally invited by Hermaeus Mora into Apocrypha to look after the realm and its endless knowledge. Now, this is not the only group of educated folk who worship and work for Hermaeus Mora. There is also the group known as the Scribes of Mora. The Scribes of Mora are an organization made up of course, scribes and librarians. This group is dedicated to documenting all that they observe out in the world and offering that knowledge up to Hermaeus Mora. The Scribes of Mora use magic to remain unseen during their documentation so that they do not interfere with events. This group resides within Scrivener's Hall, which is inside of the Rift. This location contains portals to various realms in Oblivion, allowing the scholars to observe more than just the mortal realm. So, based on Hermaeus Mora's worshippers, why would anyone choose to worship him? Well, if we firstly look at the groups like the Ayleid worshippers, the Dunmeri cults dedicated to Hermaeus Mora, along with the Ciphers of the Eye and the Scribes of Mora, these groups all place great value on knowledge, with several of these groups believing that their service to Hermaeus Mora will protect them or grant them entry to Apocrypha. Others of them, like the Ciphers' Eye, have already been granted access to the vast libraries in Apocrypha due to their own skills, these being hand-selected by, of course, Hermaeus Mora. But if we look at the less scholarly groups, like the Sailors, along with the Khajiit beliefs, where Hermaeus Mora is also heavily linked with the oceans and the tide, we see that Hermaeus Mora has the ability to both grant protection on the water, but also to take everything through the water too, especially for those not exactly careful with the omens. So for the worshippers of Hermaeus Mora, he offers knowledge and protection, even granting those he sees as promising with access to forbidden knowledge of Apocrypha as the mortal caretakers of the realm. But this is not the full story. To learn more about why Hermaeus Mora is worshipped, we will have to discuss the creations of Hermaeus Mora. With the creations of Hermaeus Mora, these can be classified into 3 different groups. Firstly, his realm in Oblivion, this being Apocrypha. Secondly, his creatures, these being things like lurkers, watchlings, and seekers. And finally, the artifacts associated with Hermaeus Mora. So let us start with the realm of Hermaeus Mora. The main realm of Hermaeus Mora is known as Apocrypha. This realm is known to vary greatly when it comes to geography, with some areas being open fields with strange plant life and other areas being seemingly unending libraries with untitled books bound in black covers containing the forbidden knowledge from all over, along with the intricate ruins and monstrous carvings that can also be found throughout Apocrypha. Throughout this realm, the sky is primarily green, this being until you get to the Chroma Incognito region, where it is much more colourful. This specific part of Apocrypha contains the location known as Fathom's Drift. Fathom's Drift is the large ship graveyard. This region of Apocrypha almost resembles the bottom of the ocean, with strange coral-like plants growing along with sharp rocks impaling the long sunken ships. This being one of the more different areas of Apocrypha. Along with this realm, there are 2 sub-realms. The first of these being the Infinite Archive. Now this realm is rather interesting because it stores mostly historical accounts, but not just of the past, also of the potential future. This sub-realm keeps track of the threads of fate and monitors for damage through an object known as the Index, which is an arcane orb. The Index is both a catalogue of the library and a safeguard for the threads of fate, able to track the breakages and attempt to restore them to the previous version. Now there is also another subrealm. This is the Infinite Panopticon. The Infinite Panopticon is an ever-changing realm, with its entrance never appearing in the same location twice. This subrealm has an endless amount of rooms and passages, with the layout and interior changing frequently to protect this subrealm. This being due to its purpose. The Infinite Panopticon is said to hold infinite secrets, including the most closely guarded secrets of Hermaeus Mora. So, the ever-changing design of the Infinite Panopticon is supposed to drive mortals insane if they see it or spend too much time inside of it. This being done to protect the secrets that are housed inside of the subrealm. Now we should also move on to discuss the various creatures that Hermaeus Mora has created. An example of the creatures he has created are the Seekers. The Seekers are a type of Daedra that are considered to be rather grotesque looking. They are tentacled beings that kind of float around, not really knowing if they float or walk. They're rather powerful beings who are masters of illusion. They use this mastery of illusion for invisibility and for decoy mirror images during attacks, using these as distractions so they can steal the strength of their opponent. They also have the ability to talk, although the Seekers pretend they cannot. The Seekers are rather intelligent beings and can often be found reading books when they are idle. Another example of the creatures that Hermaeus Mora has created are the Lurkers. Now, if you have ever seen that old horror movie Creature from the Black Lagoon, these fishy, amphibious, towering humanoids may remind you of the Gillman. But other than being reminiscent of horror movies, these Daedric beasts serve a purpose through their lurking and lingering in the murky waters of Apocrypha. The The Lurkers work together with the Seekers as guardians of the forbidden knowledge. They have several ways of doing so. If they detect a trespasser whilst they are lurking in what is known as the Creatia, or the Waters of Oblivion, they are there to stop them. So the Lurkers' long, powerful legs are very useful in stomping on trespassers. They also have the ability to spit poisonous black bile at those they are attacking, along with being able to attack their victims with tendrils that spew out of their mouths. Lovely. Now these two are not the only creatures you will find in the realm of Hermaeus Mora. There are also the Hushed. The Hushed are not so much a creation but a transformation, as the Hushed are what remains of mortals who have been consumed by the Daedric knowledge of Apocrypha. These creatures appear with only a single eye left on their face. No nose or mouth remains. They are pale and thin, with structures under their skin like the muscles, tendons, and bones being visible. The Hushed are used as a sort of guard for the locations that Hermaeus Mora desires to be private. An example of this being the Infinite Panopticon, as the Hushed can often be found wandering the halls there. There are also other guardians, creatures that Hermaeus Mora has actually created, like the Watchers and the Watchlings. The Watchers are a type of Daedra that are essentially a bunch of flying tentacles with a central eye, with the Watchlings being a smaller version of this, which are also occasionally called Pocket Watchers, as they are no bigger than a human fist. Now it is said when it comes to the central eye of these creatures, gazing in it for too long can cause a mortal soul to be eaten away. With other types of Watchers, they have necrotic gaze, so those who stare into the eye of the Watcher will have their face tear away. Most Watchers are in service to Hermaeus Mora. They are knowledge gatherers that are modelled after the appearance of Hermaeus Mora, after all. Watchers who work for Hermaeus Mora work as overseers and guardians, whereas the Watchlings are often used as messengers and recorders. With the creations of Hermaeus Mora, there are also the various artifacts that have been associated with him. An example of this is the Fulcrum Obscura. The Fulcrum Obscura was an artifact created with the assistance of Hermaeus Mora. This artifact is said to be able to uncover secrets, lost and forgotten memories from the living, but also from the dead. The mortal who created it with the help of Hermaeus Mora, Prior Durden, was said to have used it to solve murders and find lost treasure. Although the artifact sounds rather positive, its creator was said to have become so obsessed with studying the artifact that in the end, he starved to death. But this is not Hermaeus Mora's only artifact. There is also the Ogma Infinitum. The Ogma Infinitum is a book that was created by the scribe of the Oriel, who had been gifted the great knowledge within Hermaeus Mora. This book is marked as Tract Perilous, or a book that carries incredible danger to its reader. The Ogma Infinitum is an ancient tome of knowledge, which, when read, bombards its reader with an incredible amount of knowledge to intake, which is why it is considered incredibly dangerous. However, to some, their abilities will be raised to a near demigod status after reading this book. Now, not all of Hermaeus Mora's artifacts could be considered educational. There is also the First Blade. The First Blade is a sword that is also known as Mirak's sword. It is associated with the dragon priest that was Hermaeus Mora's champion, this being Mirak. Now, this blade is rather interesting as a weapon. Not only does it have the regular stabby part of the blade, the sharp part you usually use, but it also has what appears to have both the writhing tentacles of Watchers wrapped around it and the thread of Seeker sinew also on it. During combat, these strange little extras are not just for decoration. They actually have the ability to extend and attack the target, stealing the stamina of its victim. So based on the creations of Hermaeus Mora, why would anyone choose to worship Hermaeus Mora? Well, if we firstly look at his realm in Oblivion, including its subrealms, the hidden knowledge found within Apocrypha would be tempting to many curious minds, especially the information that may have been able to resolve issues. Like for example, with the last Dragonborn, his interactions with Apocrypha and Hermaeus Mora were at one point surrounding an important dragon shout that would have helped him to defeat Mirak. If we also look at the creations of Hermaeus Hermaeus Mora, more specifically the Hushed. These are mortals who pursued knowledge within Apocrypha. However, they learnt secrets that were too great for their intellect to contain. They were consumed by the knowledge and the pursuit of it, remaining as guardians of Apocrypha, constantly searching for more knowledge. The pursuit of knowledge is also evident in those who use most of Hermaeus Mora's artifacts, like the Ogma Infinitum, with its vast amounts of knowledge, and the Fulcrum Obscura with its ability to uncover lost knowledge. So with the creations of Hermaeus Mora, it's all about the pursuit of knowledge, whether this be done for good, like in the case of the last Dragonborn, or in other cases being solely just for the thirst to know deeper and darker secrets, like with the Hushed. So based on who Hermaeus Mora is, his legacy, who worships him, and his creations, we can finally answer the question, why would anyone choose to worship Hermaeus Mora? Based on Hermaeus Mora being known as the Daedric Prince of Knowledge and Secrets to many, to others he is the Daedric Prince of Fate and Destiny, and to some, like the Khajiit and Sailors, he is the controller of the tides. Throughout the eras, we see Hermaeus Mora's presence in the affairs of mortals. Like with the Merithic era, there was Merak, who betrayed his own people for the knowledge of how to bend the wills of dragons. So in the case of Merak, who became the champion of Hermaeus Mora, he chose Hermaeus Mora as a sort of deity rather than the dragons he had previously worshipped, for the knowledge and power that Hermaeus Mora granted. This knowledge gave Merak the power to kill dragons who were previously seen as gods to the people of Skyrim at the time. If we look at other cases in history, like that of Laramil the Wise, who although is not considered to be a worshipper of Hermaeus Mora, is someone strongly aligned with the Daedric Prince. Over a century ago, it is said that Laramil made a deal with Hermaeus Mora for glimpses into the Forbidden Tomes, most likely in return for providing assistance to Hermaeus Mora when issues pop up, like that of the return of Athelia. So although she is not a worshipper per se, she is an ally of the Daedric Prince, helping him in preventing reality from being destroyed, in return for what is quite literally unspeakable knowledge. If we also look at the ancient Ayleid city of Biznansel, who would worship Hermaeus Mora, we see a claim of Hermaeus Mora providing protection from the Alessian uprising to this city for the continued worship, as this city had become a shrine for Hermaeus Mora around the time of the Alessian uprising. But this city was also a place of forbidden knowledge of the world. So for the Ayleids, their worship comes for two reasons: protection from threats and limitless knowledge that could have world-changing implications. Whereas if we look at the case of Sailors, their relationship with Hermaeus Mora may not be seen as typical worship, but it could be viewed as essentially for a sort of protection from the sea. They were more about appeasing the Daedric Prince who controlled the tides than worshipping him. We see the consequences of those who did not follow the rules, appease Hermaeus Mora, or listen to the omens in the realm of Apocrypha. More specifically over in Fathom's Drift, as this is where the ships that Hermaeus Mora had claimed spend eternity. So we can see why sailors do have the superstitious appeasement of Hermaeus Mora as a form of protection. But Fathom's Drift is not the only part of Apocrypha, with much of the realm and its sub-realms also holding vast libraries, being collections of forbidden knowledge and the records of everything that was and will be. Which is where we see the mortals who are attracted to the realm and where the various creations of Hermaeus Mora come into the mix. Like the Hushed, those who take in Daedric knowledge that is just too much for them to handle. They had come to the realm to learn, and after learning something they should not have, knowledge becomes all that they seek. No longer eating, no longer drinking, and potentially no longer even sleeping. No longer even human. Along with the actual creations, the Fulcrum Obscura providing the user access to forgotten knowledge and the knowledge of the dead. Now this, along with the Ogma Infinitum, would provide those brave enough to read it immense knowledge. Both of these artifacts provide access to unimaginable knowledge, both from Hermaeus Mora but also the dead. As we see, the Fulcrum Obscura had been used by its creator to solve murders and resolve the issues of the dead. So when it comes to why someone may want to worship Hermaeus Mora, not only does he provide access to unimaginable knowledge, but he also offers protection to those who worship and respect him, preventing Merak from being killed all the way back in the Merithic era and rescuing Curate Gadain after he was supposedly destroyed by a rift in time. You yourself may choose to worship Hermaeus Mora if you are in search for great knowledge as an academic, a scribe, a mage, or even a librarian, desiring to learn the secrets of the world, even the forbidden ones. Or if you are a sailor heading out to sea hoping for some protection against the unpredictable waves and the tides of fate. So let me know in the comments if you would worship Hermaeus Mora and why. If you enjoyed this video, then you will enjoy this one. It is about the Daedric Prince Nymeria and why anyone would choose to worship her.